Welcome to part 2 of the Blood Bowl Orc project. And back to our original Orc, and working on the armor now. We're going for a, I don't know if I want to call it a light orange or a deep yellow color. I actually came up with this by mistake. I was originally going to go for red, but came up with this interesting thing. Anyway, we are starting off with just a undercoat right now of Vallejo Panzer Ace's Light Rust. And this is mostly going to be covered up. Mainly this is just to cover up the black to bring our orange color up in tone a bit so the black doesn't completely leave it dull and lifeless. So putting that all over, once again noticing I'm trying to be very careful, leaving black, thin black line between objects so we get more contrast in the end. Step number 2, and we're moving over to Vallejo Game Color Parasite Brown. And again, that color before was mainly just to cover up the black, so this color is going over pretty much everything, just leaving that light rust color in the deepest recesses, and that's about it. Moving on to the highlights, and that's done by adding Vallejo Game Color Gold Yellow to the Parasite Brown. And again, this color is fairly thin. I am layering here, so it's slowly built up layer upon layer upon layer. Probably about 3 to 4 coats, I would say. Not super thin, but definitely trying to obscure the line between the two colors, so we have a nice soft gradation. We're keeping the highlights to this particular area of the miniature fairly simple. We're just going to be adding more and more of the gold yellow each time, so here again, added a bit more to the previous mix, and again, fairly thin, and we're working our way towards the edges of all the plates of the armor. And once again, repeating the process, more gold and yellow added this time. You can see we've worked our way out to just the edges of the armor for the most part. I'm doing some highlighting in the center of the plates where there's a open spot where I can highlight. But the paint is a bit thicker at this point because we're trying to work our way towards that edge of the armor. We want a nice crisp edge, so not a huge amount of thin paint needed at this point. Allowing it to be thicker allows a bit more control and a bit more contrast on the edges. And then finally, just working on the edges themselves right now. This is the edging step, so added quite a large amount of golden yellow at this point. We're almost working with straight golden yellow, and just dragging the brush along the edges. You notice I'm using the side of the brush. You really need to use the tip of your brush. Holding it at a 90-degree angle to your surface area is a good way to destroy your brush, and the edge actually is much more useful in most cases than the tip of the brush. All the steel metal bits on the figure, keeping fairly simple, just using a 2-color scheme along with a black wash. On this particular figure, it's a bit more complicated because of the scale plated armor he's wearing, so I'm picking out each individual plate with Vallejo Model Air Gun Grey. On most of the smaller steel-colored areas, I could jump straight from Vallejo Model Air Gun Grey to Vallejo Model Air Steel as the one and only highlight color. But on the larger surface areas like the armor here, I did a in-between stage of a 50-50 mix of those two colors before going on to just straight Vallejo Model Air steel for the edging highlights. And then finally for shade, using, well, I want to say a thick black ink mix, but that's not quite exactly right. It's still very thin, but thicker than I would normally use. Once again, I'm trying to up the contrast just to get a different look to these miniatures than I would normally do. But just applying it where necessary, not trying to slather on everything to darken it all, but just going around the details for the most part where I can. To get a bit more shade and a bit more contrast. Since the armor was closer to yellow than it was to red or orange, I decided to go with red on the trim bits as my secondary color, and started off with Vallejo Model Color 926 Red as the shade and undercoat to bring the color up from black so the red doesn't look muddy. And at this point we are then base coating over that color with Vallejo Model Color Flat Red. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, I'm always saying to don't over highlight red, don't necessarily use yellows to highlight it, use flesh colors, use other things, keep it subtle. Well, screw all that, because we're going for cartoon contrast on this thing, and I'm adding Vallejo Model Color Deep Yellow to highlight my red, and I'm also adding a fair amount here because, yes, we are ramping up the contrast, going way over the bounds that I normally apply to my painting. And then for the second highlight color, even more yellow added. I've gone crazy, what am I doing? Again, this is more of an edging step here, just picking out the edges and trying to bring a bit more life to the, what do you call them? I think they're Evil Sun faces on their belt buckles and their shoulder pads. So we've gone from red to very light orange, almost working into yellow here for the highlights, way far beyond what I normally do. And then once again, just to show how far off the deep end I've gone, we are using black to shade our red. Again, that's another big no-no. You usually want to use browns, but want to up the contrast, and so we're putting black just in the recesses of the Evil Sun faces, around the cheeks and in the mouth and in the eyes, so everything pops a bit more. Not putting it over everything because that's going to make it way too faded and way too dark. I want these things to pop, try to get contrast to them. So black contrasted with very brightly oversaturated red, that is a lot of contrast right there. Let's talk about contrast a little more, shall we? Again, since I want everything to really pop cartoonish-like on this miniature, a lot of the smaller areas I had to go back and paint over in black because I wanted a deep contrast to them. Perfect example here are the teeth. Went back to make sure they weren't covered with any paint in the recesses, went over them with black again, and now I'm picking them out with Vallejo Model Color Beige, and so that very light beige against the black in the rest of the mouth area really makes those teeth pop out, which is exactly what I want for this particular project. The foot wraps on some of the miniatures they're a huge pain in the butt to paint. Even I rarely try to carefully highlight and shade these type of things where it's just a whole lot of detail in a small area. So we're going to take the shortcut on these and just going over them with a Vallejo Model Color Beige, the same color I used on the teeth, and just base coating over the entire thing. If there's some black left in the deepest recesses, that's totally fine. The shade we apply next is going to cover all that up anyway. And then we cover up the beige with a thick wash of Army Painter's Strong Tone ink, and it's a very quick two-step process. This is a lot cleaner and a lot better than trying to pick out all those individual wraps by hand. The Army Painter washes, you have to put these on very thick. Don't thin them out because they don't work otherwise, and essentially just glop them on. Just be careful you don't get it on other parts of the miniature, but it's very effective, especially for small detail projects like this where there's a lot of texture for it to grab onto. Last thing I have to do is paint the team numbers on each individual orc, and doing that with black paint and a number 1 brush, which is not my smallest brush, but it's the one with the best tip, and slightly thick number 4 we're doing here because this is not going to be the only color we're applying to the back. And then once the black is dry, going over it again with a slightly more delicate touch with some beige. So we have the beige number with the black outline around it, which gives us, everybody say it together with me, contrast. Yes, helps it stand out a bit more on against the red background with the black edging. But with that, we're done. So let's take a look at the final results. And there we have it. Our Blood Bowl team is complete and ready to play. Well, not quite complete. I know there's a couple miniatures missing here, but didn't want you to wait an extra 2 weeks to see the video. But all done. Very high contrast, a lot more than what I normally do, but it was fun. I like the cartoony look. And it's one more project out of the closet, which is great. I've had these guys for 15 plus years. And Blood Bowl's a fun game. I hope it comes back soon. But at least I'm ready to play now. All I have to do is find that bastard who stole my copy about 19 years ago. Gonna get him one day. Yeah.